What's up, guys? Coach Madden, YouGoProBaseball.com, here with Brent Pourciau, Top Velocity. We're in his house right now, and in fact, I made a video a while ago called the 9 pitching velocity killers, and then Brent came like a little bit later and made, how many was it? 10?
Maybe it was, yeah, I'm only going to one-up you, man. Come on.
So he made 10 pitching velocity killers, both great videos. So
yeah, but then you were like, I'm coming back at you.
Yeah, I said I'm doing 11 velocity killers, you jerk. But this video right here, we're going to talk about pitching velocity leaks, where guys are leaking their velocity, and we're going to make this a little bit fun. We're going to have a competition. I'm going to give you one leak. He's going to give you one leak. We haven't talked about this. We don't even know what we're going to talk about. We're just kind of freestyling right now. But in all seriousness, this is going to be some good stuff, because at the end of the day, if you're creating energy and then losing it, you're not getting as much as you can out of your kinetic chain. And that's what we're trying to do as pitchers. We're trying to create energy from the ground, transfer it through our kinetic chain, and get it out through the ball on our fingers.
This could go into mindset. This could go into what you ate. And I mean, we could be here for a long time, John.
So do we want to stick with mechanics on this?
Is that what you want?
So, are you competitive?
Yeah, a little bit.
I can tell. All right, so I think Brent's going to win this one. But let me start with the first pitching velocity leak. And the first thing that I see, and probably the biggest one that I see, is the front leg. Yep. In my opinion, I see so many guys when they land, they're leaking out forward this way. Or out this way. They're getting too much rotational energy, and they're kind of leaking out that way. So that's the biggest thing that I see as far as a leak goes. For me, when I see that, I like to work on, and I want you to elaborate on this before you get into your leak too, but what I see with that is it's either a lack of, obviously, how we're using our rotational and linear energy, one. Could be a strength issue, not strong enough to brace up, or mobility issue. So those are the three things.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that?
No, I mean, I think you nailed it. I think it's, the only thing I would probably say, even more than strength issue, it's a power issue, because it's strength just says you can hold a force. It doesn't say how quickly you can hold a force. And we know when the front foot lands, you got 0.1, 0.2 seconds, and you can't have any lead knee movement, because studies show high velocity pitchers don't have any lead knee movement. So you got to catch it immediately, and that's power. So now there's a time to when you create your force, and that's what power means, or what they call rate of force development. How quickly do you turn that force on?
And you see a lot of guys who are, when they get in here and they brace up, the knee comes back, tracks back, and they go this way. But you don't have to be straight, do you?
No, at the end of the day, it's just getting energy to the ball. And of course, you got to create it, and that has to do with you creating it, and it has a high correlation to velocity the more you can extend it. But it's how hard you want to throw. Yeah, I mean, you have to say, if I did get more extension before release, I would have thrown harder, because that's what the studies show.
Okay. What do you got? Number 2.
Oh, I'm going to go back leg. So, we get this a lot. When guys come to the leg lifts and they start moving, they collapse that leg, right? They collapse the leg. Why is that a problem, collapsing the leg? Is because the leg stays strong in external rotation. Think about it. When you squat, we squat here. Nobody squats like that, right?
So I've seen some guys squat like that.
Unless you're watching CrossFit fails on YouTube, right? So if we go here, then we internally rotate, we lose stability. I'm not stable here. And then we collapse, and then we try to overcompensate. So that's a big one. Collapsing back leg is huge.
Okay. Now let me ask you this, and you can elaborate on this. What I talk about as far as back leg goes, I think differs a little bit from how you speak about it. For me, I call it the angled corkscrew. So I actually do want to be inside of my back foot slightly, and I think that you have to have good hip mobility to do this, to create that angle. I don't want to collapse it. I want to create that angle and then kind of corkscrew out with the foot.
Torsion. Yeah, so what I was just saying is, you're right. You'd be internally rotated. It is better to be externally rotated. But yeah, you can keep it inside your knee. You just need to be externally rotated. So that is a good point.
Awesome, awesome. So this would be number 3, right? Pitching velocity leak. Number 3, what I see is guys who lose their energy with their upper body. So they leak out energy this way. They don't block off, okay? And I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this, because I don't think I've ever seen a video where you talk about this. I'm sure there is one. I just haven't seen it. What I like to teach my guys is when they separate to be 45 degrees closed off or more this way with their arms, but then when they unwind, they want to block that energy off so they can finish more linear this way. If you got a guy who just spins out and flies out, the way I like to think about that is all your energy is going this way. It's almost like you're running if you were running with a flag. If I'm running this way with a flag, the flag is going to be going that way. If I'm pulling all my energy out this way, all my energy is going to go this way. My arm's going to fly out, and I'm going to be leaking my energy that way.
That's a great one. Glove side is a key one. Studies show that low velocity pitchers have more left to right movement with their glove sides. High velocity pitchers are more, they just turn it over typically. And then the energy is really coming from somewhere else. So you're right. If you're using this to create energy, it's usually rotational energy, and it's flying you off and taking your energy somewhere else. That's a huge one. Really good one.
You're up. Number 4.
So here we go. I'm going to talk about the posture. Let's talk about posture in the head position, right? So if either way, if my head gets too far this way, my head gets too far that way, if my head gets too far this way, if my head gets too far that way, it kind of goes along with what John's talking about, leaking or pulling across your body. This is your posture. This is the balance of where you are. So I have to really keep this over my trunk, over my hips, and like the whip, all moving balanced towards the target. And once I let this head go here, where do you think my energy's going? You know, that's why you see sidearm pitchers. They start moving like a regular pitcher, and then their head starts doing that, and that's where they go. I'm your sidearm guy. Yep. Or if I start leaning this way, then then I'm flying off this way. Or if I want to start early, and then everything transfers early. So to me, the head, the posture is huge to prevent a big loss of energy, and in all directions. I always say the best place it needs to be is just behind your front hip. So just behind it, not all the way back here, because that could slow me down, right? Or not in front of it, not over my belt buckle, not over my butt, just in balance, just behind my front hip, and then it's all about riding all that energy towards the target.
At the end of the day, we're athletes. We should be athletes. We need to be athletes, and you got to be able to use your body the right way. And that's a great one. I like that. Number 5.
I'm glad you're keeping up with the numbers here, because we're going to lose track of the numbers.
So number 5, what I got for you is, let's talk about the separation from the lower body and upper body. I see a lot of guys when they start pitching, and maybe this is not so much of a leak, but just not getting as much as they could have.
Yeah, coiling up, right?
Yeah, so when they're driving out, their shoulders are moving with their hips. And I see this a lot with especially younger guys, high school age guys, even some college guys, you'll see that too. Obviously, they're not throwing as fast because they're not getting the separation that they need. Hip to shoulder separation, you want to have more separation between your lower body and your upper body. And like I said before, I like to tell my guys to separate at 45 degrees or more, closed off. So now you've got this upper body already closed off as you start moving down the mound. And once you get used to that timing of separating the lower body to the upper body, you're going to be able to create more energy or get more out of the energy that you're creating to put it through the baseball. So that's number 5. You got anything to add to that?
No, I think you nailed that. That was pretty good.
You got number 6 yet?
Number 6. I know. Here we go. So we should get into the arm path. I think the arm path is going to be key too. Okay. So just like we want to separate, just like we want to pull hips and shoulders apart, we've got to be careful with this. When we get into the arm path, if we overdo it, we exaggerate the tips I'm giving you, it could throw off the timing and really hurt your arm. So you got to be careful when you start playing with the arm path stuff. But just like wanting to separate the hips and shoulders, we have to take the elbow and we have to load the scap or pull it back and get it, not trying to overdo it, but get it nice and tight and pull it behind the shoulder, because just like pulling the hip and shoulder apart gives you more time to create energy, pulling the elbow away from the shoulder gives you even a little bit more time to load the arm and carry that energy forward. So, and there's a study that also showed that they compared, it was Korean pitchers to I think American pitchers, and one of the key things that Korean pitchers, and they threw slower than American pitchers on average in the study, the one key things that they weren't doing as well as they weren't, it's called horizontal abduction, pulling the elbow behind the back, scap loading there. So like I said, be careful with doing that, because it can go bad if you go too far and get too aggressive with it, but it is a key point. So if you're cocking the ball here and then you start cocking it here, it's a leak. You're losing energy cocking it out here than if you were cocking it a little bit more behind your scap.
And you'd get more separation as well, right?
It will add to it.
Even if you're here and you've got good separation with your shoulders, you'd be better if you were more scap loaded.
Scap loaded, yep.
Cool.
You got another one?
6?
7?
7? Who knows?
7. No, I did 6.
Okay. So for this one, I'm going to talk about flicking the wrist. You hear all the time, you got to flick that wrist to get the backspin and get maximum velocity, right? I disagree, and I don't know where you stand on this, but if you're coming through and you're trying to stay straight behind that ball and flick like this, you're going to be losing a lot. You're going to be leaking a lot. You're not going to be getting as much as you could. How I see the wrist working is we're going from supinated, which is kind of this position with the wrist, to as I get to release point, I'm turning it over and pronating it through release point. So that's kind of the flick of the wrist, if you will, or how I think it should work, or how I used to feel it working, was coming through it and getting extension, not only with the wrist, but the shoulders as well. So getting the extension with the front shoulder and then coming through it. So my extension with the wrist coming over and pronating is how the wrist should really work, in my opinion. What do you think about that? Got anything?
Yeah, I'm thinking I add to it is like everything's action reaction. So the action is what's happening when you're turning your shoulders and you're cocking your arm. It actually throws force in what's called supination, which is the thumb going back. So you're actually trying to resist that force, right? So you cock the arm and you turn, and this wants to swivel against that movement, and you resist it. So what is the action of resisting a supinated force? Pronation. So that's why you got to be careful, like trying to point the ball to second base. You got to be careful, like if you're doing this long arm action, you might be preventing that good supinated resistance, which fires all that good pronation that John's talking about. So think action reaction. What's the action? The action is to resist supination, to then turn, and also to resist external rotation, because that's what you're trying to do. You don't want your arm to keep spinning around, and that's going to create the reaction of internal rotation, pronation, right? So just be careful when you're playing with your arm that you're not allowing it to do that, to create that nice, efficient release of the arm movement, because that is going to affect velocity, and it will really start to mess with injury. Like it could start causing inflammation.
So where should they be? So if they're a guy and they heard their pitching coach always saying, point it back to second base, where actually should they start? Or is that personal preference? Or
So it works best this way. If you're an early arm cocker, which is all based on when your front foot lands. If your front foot lands and you're already up, you're an early arm cocker. If your front foot lands and you're still coming up, you're in a late arm cocker. So if you're an early arm cocker, you want to be more pronated, because then that helps with the scap loading. Because see, if I'm supinated, now I'm externally rotated. So I want to pronate to help with the scap loading if I'm an early arm cocker, because I wouldn't want to do this and then land and I'm already open. If I'm a late arm cocker, I don't want to be more pronated, because then my arm's going to drag. So I can be more supinated if I'm a late arm cocker, because my arm's late to get up, and it's going to apply the force later back on the arm. So you can be more supinated.
you just gave me another one, so I'm good for at least one more round.
Okay.
I don't even know what number we're on.
I think we can nitpick and keep going. I think we're on 8. Well, I don't know why I remember the numbers, but hip extension, right? So, you know, guys, we want to, just like you're talking about 45 degree with the trunk, well, make sure it's in the hip. The hip needs the counter. We need a counter into this hip to flex, to allow for extension, and also delay rotation. It does two things. It delays rotation and gives us more flexion to create extension. So if I'm this guy just lifting and I'm already showing my back hip like right out of the gate, I'm losing all that energy that I could get in delaying rotation, because then we'd have to create faster rotation later, and I'm getting more flexion, so now I can power through the glute, the hamstring, the lower leg, more extension, and we know that's ground force. If I'm separating, that's more energy up the chain.
That's a great one. That's a great, and you see that a lot too with young pitchers. How do you use the King of the Hill to work on that?
So the King of the Hill is a coaching aid to tell you how well you're creating force and when you're creating force. So if you don't know the King of the Hill, it's two sliding plates that the only way we can make it bang is if we push hard enough against the plunger in a direction back towards second base. So if it bangs, it means we got linear, meaning we got the force vector, which is the ankle to knee, down, and we pushed back towards second base. And ultimately, we want to hear that bang just as we're landing. If I hear it after landing, it was too late. I drove too late. We have to hear it just before we land, that pop, that bang off the King of the Hill, and it gives us that good feedback that we pushed hard enough, because you can crank it to make it harder, and we pushed at the right time, at the right angle.
And you sell the King of the Hill on your website?
And so do you.
I sure do. And I'd like to take this opportunity to let you know that I have a 2-year-old. He's going to be going to college one day here soon. I like to clothe and I like to feed him as well. So you guys make the decision.
And I got an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old.
Cut.
And they're girls.
Oh, damn. Go to the site. What number are we on?
9.
All right, number 9. 9 pitching velocity leak. I'm going to talk about the guys who, when they come down the mound and they're getting high with the shoulder, it's almost like they're starfishing as they get down, and the shoulder is higher than they're coming out of that scap load position and they're getting too high. I see a lot of guys doing that, and I think it might be a miscoaching cue, because you hear all the time, get your arm up, get your arm up, get your arm up, and I see that, and it just they look jammed up, and it's not smooth, it's not fluid, and those guys typically don't throw very hard, and if they do, they're putting themselves at risk to get injured. So that's a big one as far as leaking velocity, or just putting yourself in a bad position and jamming yourself up and not being able to create as much as you possibly could. Got anything on that?
Well, I think it's the same thing. You're going to mess with that action reaction to really coiling the arm. You're fighting against allowing it to naturally do that, and that's where you got to be careful. But I think that's a great one.
Perfect. Number 10.
10. You're gonna kick yourself that you didn't think of this one.
All right.
Front foot strike. Where do we land? Do we land closed?
Good one.
Or do we land open? Right. Okay. Here's the thing, and this can get crazy. If you're a big rotator, I would suggest you not being. But if you're a big puller and rotator, you're going to do better landing more closed, because it's going to give you more range or more angular distance to cover to create speed. So if you're a puller and you land here, you don't have much time. You're going to be like, right? So, and I'm not promoting you being an over rotator, but just know if you're leaking velocity, if you're landing too much to the open side. If you're a driver, you could probably land more to the open side, but still, the studies show if you take your back foot and you draw a line to the target, from the middle of your foot to the target, you want to land about 6-7 inches inside that. And because we drive in the front foot, you're technically going to be toe to heel, and you want to be 20 degrees closed. Why is that? Because what you're doing is you're landing that slightly across your body, is because your femurs connect, and they actually kind of like dog leg into your hip sockets, and they're out here. So we have to actually bring the foot across our hip. So when our hips open, they stabilize towards the target. If I went just straight in line and then tighten my hips up, now I'm shooting off to the on-deck circle. So landing, that's 7 inches across, 20 degrees as I drive through. When my hips open up, now I'm locked down to the target, and everything can accelerate towards the target. So you're leaking if you're going open. I mean, at the end of the day, the more open you go, the more velocity you're losing.
That's a good one. I am kicking myself.
All right.
This is my last one. This is all I got right here. So if you got another one, I'm conceding victory. Okay, so think of your last one here. My last one is the some guys call it the pull down, or that, for me, I think of pitching as the linear energy, then the rotational energy, and then that last linear piece, and then blending it all together. But I see a lot of guys, they either don't get that last pull down at the end, or they're kind of already into it as they get into their front leg. So that's a huge one. You're losing it. If you're already into it, obviously you don't have it. And then guys who are finishing way too tall, they're not getting as much out as they could if they can get onto that angle that we were talking about earlier. So that's my number 11. You got anything to add to that one?
Man, I think the one I'm thinking about might be exactly what you were talking about in the beginning, to get the front leg more extended. That was the other one I thought about. But, I mean, I could say this. Tell me, it might go along with what you're talking about, because what you're talking about is getting the trunk more forward, right? Because that is a big piece. But the studies show it's not just about getting the trunk more forward, which it is, but there's more. It's getting the arm more laid back. So that's going to be my last piece. Watch this.
Go for it.
So why do we lay back the arm, right? Why does the arm lay back? A lot of people say it's to create that plyometric effect, right? It's like cranking on the catapult. Yank it back, and all that musculature fires it. Well, that has something to do with it. But more importantly, and I guess it kind of goes into what you were talking about, when we let the arm lay back at the right time, typically right when the trunk squares up, not any later where it gets out here. If the elbow gets in front of the trunk, it's too late. If we get the arm laid back right when the trunk squares up, now it's going to give us all this time to push the trunk forward before release. So the arm laying back is actually a mechanism to allow the trunk to go farther forward to put more energy in the ball. And that's like the whip. As I drive the handle of the whip forward, that's going to carry more of the body of the whip, which is where most of the energy is, that's going to go up to the end of the whip. So that's what we're doing with the arm. So if I get the arm to lay back just when the trunk squares up, now I can carry the trunk more to the target before the arm instantly rotates, potentially getting more energy into the ball, which is a huge velocity leak because you see a lot of kids just wanting to stop their trunks or their arms are late, and it kills all that velocity that they can get up the chain.
It's great. Great points. That's all I got for you. So I concede victory to you. Congratulations. Never going to happen again, though.
You still own me on YouTube. So.
Appreciate it. Speaking of, we got 4 tips that we put together for you guys. Really good stuff to instantly increase your pitching velocity. If you want to watch that video, it's great stuff. I definitely recommend you do. It's the first link in the description. Click it, put your first name and your email, and we'll shoot that video over to you right away. Start working on it because you're going to see some results from it. Thank you so much for watching. Good job. They'll come up and they start moving down the mound, and this back leg is kind of really straight. Let me ask you something. If you were going to try to jump as high as you can, would you jump with a slight bend in your leg, or would you really get down there and explode up? You'd want to get down there, get into your legs and explode up, bend those legs.